John Chellew, founder of the Bayside School Refusal Clinic. Welcome to School TV.
Thank you for the invitation.
Mate, can I start by asking you, what is your definition of school refusal?
Well, firstly, Michael, most kids will have difficulty with attending school at some point in their life. It's normal for a kid on a Sunday night to say, "Oh, Mum, I don't want to go to school tomorrow," or on the first day back after a term break, or at a transition time. However, school refusal itself is more ongoing, persistent avoidance from school with symptoms mainly associated with anxiety.
Do you regard it as a mental illness?
No, I don't. I describe it as a symptom of a mental illness rather than a diagnosable mental illness in itself. It's not listed in the DSM-5, but it is comorbid with anxiety, depression, sleep difficulties, and separation anxiety are the main ones.
Before the coronavirus, they reckon it was around about 4% prevalence. Would you anticipate, with all the stop-start that the kids have gone through, that it might increase?
I think so. I think anxiety in the community is generally rising anyway, particularly with young girls more recently, and right across the country. However, in this current environment of coronavirus restrictions, I think anxiety amongst children is going up for sure.
Help me understand the impact of school refusal on a young person's academic performance and their relationship with peers and teachers at school.
Well, I think missing out on school causes problems in all those areas. Academics is a major one, obviously, because kids are missing classroom learning, which is really important for them to get that rich and thick experience of learning in a group, of listening to a teacher, of concentrating, of focusing. It also affects their social relationships. So a child who's not at school is going to miss out on those experiences. They might be in a little social group that suddenly they're falling out of touch with, and therefore they feel more reluctant to go back to school because they've got to face the questions of where have you been? Why haven't you been here? Don't you like school anymore? And they're very difficult questions for kids to answer when they're really embarrassed about not being at school often.
Do you find it more prevalent in primary school kids or secondary school kids?
Referrals to my clinic would indicate a 50-50 mix of both primary and secondary. I'm currently treating a child who's 5 years old and also a young boy who's 17. It doesn't discriminate across gender, socioeconomic class, or culture. I'm getting referrals right across the board.
What impact does having a child who simply won't go to school have on the family?
Well, it causes a lot of family conflict and distress for everybody concerned, particularly the parents, but also siblings who often miss out on parental attention because the symptomatic child is getting all the focus, whether that be negative or positive focus. And of course, the school refusing child, him or herself, is really distressed, particularly nights before school or getting up for school in the morning, and will often complain to the parents and sometimes actually have quite significant behavioural problems and kicking back and refusing to go, and then the anxiety turns into that fright or flight response where the kids will either self-isolate and withdraw or start exhibiting some really challenging behaviour which the whole family are experiencing usually on a daily basis.
Obviously, early intervention is important here. Are there any telltale signs that we could alert school TV parents to that might predict the development of this problem?
For sure. The things to look out for parents are a child really complaining the night before school, really, that they don't want to go to school the next day. The child might have a really sleepless night, so sleep difficulties are a red flag. And of course, not getting out of bed in the morning, complaining about headaches or tummy aches, or feeling sick, coming up with excuses so that they don't have to go to school, but often not coming out and saying, "I'm anxious." So parents need to be detectives, really, to really open up the child to talk about what the reason is for their avoidance of school, and not just sort of react to the behaviour, but firstly understand the symptoms and then form a response rather than a reaction to the answers they get.
What are the legal ramifications for a kid who just refuses to go to school?
State by state, the rules are slightly different. Mm-hmm. In Victoria, we're a little bit more lenient, I understand, than other states. However, it is a requirement for children to attend school until the age of 16 in Victoria. There's no punitive measures in place, as I understand. However, the Department of Education obviously wants children to be at school as much as possible and have resources in place to assist schools and families to address that problem.
How should a parent handle school refusal?
Well, firstly, opening up communication with their child. I think that's really important. So listening to their child describe what their fears are. Now, if it's a primary age child, it's likely to be trouble with the teacher or a bully in the playground or a particular subject that they're struggling with. They might have a learning difficulty and have fallen behind with their times tables. Or for an older child, it might be falling out of touch with their peer group. So the parents need to be investigators of those problems and respond to them as best they can.
Do you ever use the idea of a peer buddy system, particularly for recess and lunchtime?
I think that works really well with primary age children. If they're in their younger years, a grade sixer might be appointed to be a bit of a buddy in the playground in free time. In a secondary school environment, that can also work in, say, year 7, 8, maybe 9. What I try to encourage at drop-off is the parents to encourage their kids to find a friend. And so rather than a buddy being assigned, they already have an existing friend who might be at school, maybe come to school with that parent or with that child together. Or when they get to the school gate at drop-off, their job is to go and find their friend and bring them to the gate, wave goodbye to mum and dad, and off they go into the classroom together with that child. And that really is a helpful way to tackle it.
Can you help me understand what a return to school plan is?
Well, that's a plan after an assessment that I would undertake with both parent, child and school. We then we understand the symptoms and a targeted response. It's very important that all three parties are on the same page. Therefore, a meeting at school can be a really helpful way of coming up with a plan in response to the particular child's difficulties, which are unique in every case. So that would be at a meeting. Usually I would recommend that the adults meet first and then bring the child in, depending on their age, so they're not being spoken about in front of the child. And then the child then has some input into that plan once the plan is pretty much established. But it is important for the child to have some ownership, and certainly the parents to have some ownership. The return to school plan, though, has two parts to it. One would be a plan of getting the child ready to get to school, and once at school, what's going to happen. Now that could involve a graduated response to school. It might be just they turn up on sports days or just at recess or just until recess and then go home. So that we're encouraging the child to take on what they can do, what they're ready for at that particular time, and then encourage them to pursue and persist and develop a full school attendance.
John, how important is routine, structure and sleep?
It's one of the main causes of school refusal. When kids aren't sleeping well, they're waking up obviously tired and grumpy, and sometimes that presents as depression or sickness, and the children just aren't ready to even contemplate going to school because they're feeling so challenged by the academic and social demands of school. The structure is really important so that the children have a sense of what's going to happen during their day and what's going to happen at night, what's going to happen in the morning, so that there's less surprises. And they also feel more contained when the parents are putting in those structures so that the children feel reassured that they know what to expect.
What's reasonable to expect from schools if your kid's basically refusing to turn up?
Well, schools have an obligation to contact the parent if there's an unexplained absence of any student, and usually by 10 o'clock in the morning. So the parents might be at work and the child hasn't turned up at school. So in order for safety reasons, their duty of care is to call home and let one of the parents know that their child isn't at school.
If I've recognised some of the signs that you've talked about, and I've realised that I've got a kid who's a potential school refuser, what's my first step as a parent?
Well, the first thing would be to act talk promptly. Sometimes kids just will kick back and it's a situational problem, but I'd be encouraging parents to think about if their child's kicking back from attending school over 2 weeks, they should be really, like I said before, open up communication, try to understand the reasons why their child is having a difficulty and getting them to talk, getting them to open up and not reacting but responding. I think that they should communicate with the school their difficulties and have up a conversation with, if it's primary school, the school teacher or the assistant principal. If it's a secondary school, I think they should be approaching the school counsellor or the year level coordinator would be the two key people.
John Chellew, on behalf of School TV, thank you so much for your time and experience.
Thank you for the invitation to talk.